Christmas. It loses some of its impact as you get older and people selfishly start expecting you to buy them presents. But I love it all the same. I love the lights, the decorations, the market stalls. It really helps distract you from the dreary British weather, you know? I always have a grand old time going into the city centre and stuffing my face with great seasonal food like Dutch pancakes or curry. And then, most importantly, on the big day itself, there's all the quality time you get to spend with your free stuff. And I guess I, like Madonna and Karl Marx before me, am just a material girl living in a material world. But sometimes you're just not in the mood to go out and freeze your nips off for a Yorkshire pudding. Winter is indoor season, the time of cozy blankets, lit fireplaces and staring blankly at a computer monitor in the dark, wondering where it all went wrong. And lately, ever since my darling girlfriend returned to the US, I've been passing the lonely nights by digging through the catacombs of old retro computer Christmas crap. The home computer scene over here loved Christmas, and every year, every single one of its disparate little niches got together to celebrate. From magazine cover discs to PD games, and even pragmatic utilities, there was seasonal cheer abound. Some of these productions would go on to be pretty iconic, and I feel like they're one of the best representations we have of how playful and whimsical computing could be before smartphones came along and ruined everything. Can't believe they literally got away with this twice. Stario's Christmas is a sequel to the Atari ST classic Super Stario Land, which did what Great Guyana Sisters could not and blatantly cloned Super Mario without incurring the wrath of the Nintendo lawyers. The game actually received full-on press coverage in the lead-up to its release, and early preview screenshots showed that the game was initially built using stolen Mario sprites, which were, allegedly, drawn by putting up graph paper against the TV and tracing them pixel by pixel. Ultimately, the game did come out with mostly original graphics, courtesy of Richard Davey, best known for creating the Little Green Desktop. According to Davey, in a post on AtariLegend.com,
I was approached by James Matthews of Top Byte Software, which was effectively the commercial arm of PowerPD, to do the graphics for Super Stario Land. I had known James for a while because of his Power Disc magazine, and at that time the ST scene was contracting in size rapidly. He told me he had this great Mario clone that he'd been sent, but he couldn't publish it because the graphics had literally been copied, pixel for pixel, from the NES.
And yet, after all that, he still ripped the title screen graphics from Pac-Land. Legend. If anyone was still paying attention to the Atari ST market in 1995, they would have gotten absolutely obliterated for this. The Stario games are pretty decent little bootlegs though. The scrolling is incredibly smooth for the Atari ST, and the controls are exactly as awful as you'd expect from a Mario game. It rules. The music by Big Alec is a big highlight. I especially love the ominous and melancholic cave music. It really makes the AY sound chip sing. However, if you turn the music on, it turns the sound effects off, and then it just keeps playing till it loops. You beat the level or you die. And there are no little jingles for getting extra lives, no death song, nothing. It can feel a little bit like you've just shoved a song on in the background while you play the game. It feels disconnected from anything that's happening on screen. The original Stario Land procedurally generated its levels, but sadly, it doesn't seem like it had too many chunks to play with. It doesn't take long before you start noticing the same obstacles and the same arrangements repeating over and over again, even in the same level. But fortunately, Stario's Christmas threw this element away in favor of fixed levels inspired by the work of Hirofumi Matsuoka and Masahiro Mishimo. Something I found really funny is that the Stario Land games control so much more like Mario games than the original Mario Land does. And much as I'm not really a fan of how old-school 2D Mario usually handles, I am infamous for being a Mario World hater, the controls feel infinitely more polished than the real Mario Lands do. It even scrolls more smoothly than the Game Boy original, which is genuinely impressive. Like, this game was not limited to the later Atari STE machines with their PCM audio and their hardware scrolling and their blitter. This is how the game looks running on a regular ST. It's a legitimately incredible feat of programming to get it moving like this. I was shocked to learn that the Stario games weren't PD software. This had a publisher and, magazine previews, cover disc demos, the works. It has stolen graphics, copied level design, and its name is a pun on one of the most famous games in existence, and then it went on to get good reviews from professionally published magazines. What a fucking time. I didn't pay for it though, of course, and I suspect most people who played it didn't either. I, for one, found it on this sick pack menu with a ripped graphic of a St. MCA boy on it. But there are versions of this game on dozens of menu discs from just about every group in the ST Wares scene. Truly, Europe has piracy of the soul. Pack discs, or pack menus, are collections of software crunched onto a single disc and distributed by swappers in the scene, referring here to both the wares and demo scenes, which were still basically the same thing back in the home computer era. A lot of them were just utility packs collecting tools that were of particular interest to the scene. Reverse engineering tools were pretty commonplace, for example, as well as compression software, trackers, and graphics packages. Of course, sometimes groups would fuck all that shit off and stuff their discs full of games. Naturally, many of these pack discs contained illegal games, like the one I got Stario's Christmas from, but compilations of public domain games and shareware demos were common as well. It's a great way of familiarizing yourself with the PD scene of a given computer, and the Atari ST's menus are particularly easy to find thanks to etherealserah.com. Of course, demo scene-centric sites like Exotica, Pue, and DemoZoo also host pretty comprehensive archives for a variety of hardware platforms, and there's also the TOSEC sets for each computer. There were bunches of Christmas-themed menus made, featuring seasonal demos. Cool little animations to put you in the festive mood. But just because a menu was Christmas-themed, it doesn't mean that the software had to be. In December 1993, Adrenaline released its public domain pack disc for the Atari STE, the 1989 enhanced model with the improved audio and shit. It came with this nice little wintry image and some fun Christmas BGM, but managed not to include a single Christmas-themed game. Nice. They're still worth checking out though. Pac-Man Unease is a classic, a blisteringly fast take on Pac with an absolute rager of a soundtrack. I wasted hours on this thing. The driving beats really elevate an already addictive game loop into something special, filling it with an energy and an urgency that the arcade cab could only dream of. There's a sequel apparently, which I am for sure going to check out at some point. Most of the games on this disc are variations on existing classics as it happens, like Tesserae, which is a swaggy version of Tetris with the world's longest horizontally scrolling developer message. Its funky chiptunes, surreal shifting backgrounds, and gradiented tetrominos proved back in the 90s what the Tetris effect would decades later, that aesthetics can be just as important as gameplay, that, to quote a good friend of mine, style is substance. Tetris is great even when it's plain, but giving it these bouncy, colourful club aesthetics makes it 1,000 times more appealing to me. Super Dark Pearl and Nirvana didn't make quite the same impression on me, sadly. Pearl is similar to Bounder for the Commodore 64, but they're somehow even more frustrating. I found myself wasting a lot of time on this, and I really want to love it, but the collision is so strict and the graphics just don't feel like they convey the tile boundaries very well. Nirvana it just doesn't feel good to control. It absolutely demands perfection in your jumps, and it all just feels so stiff and unresponsive. The bleepy, bloopy Atari VCS-esque audio got a little tiring eventually too, and look, I don't have much good to say, and I really don't want to be mean to this indie game from 30 years ago, so let's just move the fuck on. Lucky for you though, I've saved the best till last. The cream of the crop, the cherry on top, the cat you just can't stop. Motherfucking Garfield. That's right, bitches. We were scared of Garfield all the way back in the early 90s. It's certainly the most narratively and artistically ambitious of the games on offer. It's a story about first contact, about humanity losing its place as the dominant species, about our place in this vast and hostile universe, about staring death in the face and telling it, I am not afraid, before oblivion takes us forever. It's such a genuinely charming little game. It sucks. It's choppy and unresponsive, and the enemy formations feel straight up unfair, but the clip art garths and the monster profiles are just It's so silly, and the ripped Terminator music gives it this portentous air that I really enjoy. Ironically, Epic's silly scrimblow shit is a quick path to my heart. Well, unironically, Epic's silly scrimblow shit is too, come to think of it. It's the sort of game that really endeared me to the PD scene. Completely silly, utterly unfiltered, and divorced entirely from commercial concerns. The sort of game that you can only find by digging through the endless mounds of amateur game dev. PD games like this are the precursor to the Flash and freeware sites of my tween and teen years. So many of the aesthetic trends that make me nostalgic for that era started back in the home computer days. The sky gradients, the music, the stolen assets, the edgy anti-fan games, it's all here. Both eras just have so much of the same playful, enthusiast energy, and it's such a shame that retrospectives for these computers really only tend to focus on the commercial releases, especially when some of the best games ever made for them are PD games, like Santa and Rudolph Do Christmas, a seasonal take on the jetpack formula. I was genuinely shocked to learn that this never ended up on any magazine cover discs. It's good enough to sell commercially, easily, with some great graphics, nice music, and chunky sound design. Like, I wasn't kidding. This is one of my favorite 16-bit action games now, and I expect most people will think I'm fucking mental. I shall take solace in knowing that they are cowards and will die unloved and unmourned. I was a little unclear on what the actual goal of the game was at first. Basically, you gotta grab the presents as they fly across the screen and then deliver them to the grateful children cowering in their houses. Take too long and you'll be subjected to the most ear-searing alarm noise ever synthesized, after which the regular enemies will be replaced by these invincible spike balls, which, can actually be a good bit easier to dodge than the regular enemies. The game was developed by Ian West and John Egerton, the latter of which eventually went on to work in the commercial video game industry, contributing to a bunch of Wipeout games and even doing design on this one kinda underrated PS1 game called Assault Retribution. Apparently, they tried to get the game onto some magazine cover discs, but alas, to no avail. It's such a shame, because I think it would be remembered as a cover disc favourite today if it had been on there, but at least it gets to be one of the better loved PD games, I guess. Magazine cover discs were no stranger to PD software, and it was probably the only way to access most of it for at least some computer-owning children at the time. As evidenced by the interview I linked with Ian West in the description, PD programs were frequently plucked from their respective libraries by the mags and shoved onto the disc without the authors even knowing about it. There's nothing sketchy about this, to be clear, so long as the software in question was actually public domain. Sharing shit around was very much in the spirit of things. Occasionally, you'd see a PD Christmas game creep onto a cover disc months removed from the holiday season, such as with the One Amiga's 68th issue in May 1994. Xmas Time sets expectations high with an ominous opening text followed by a banging club rendition of a classic Christmas tune. The story goes that Santa's presents have all been stolen and scattered to the four winds by nefarious console-owning Sega and Nintendo fans, furious at the spread of the Amiga's glory. And now, it is up to you to help him track them down in time for Christmas Eve, all while pounding the sneaky poachers to death with his sack. It's another single-screen platformer, this time somewhat reminiscent of Rodland, maybe? You can't really jump, you just move from platform to platform in the direction indicated by the arrows on the ground. At the beginning of each level, you're told how many presents you need to get and how long you have to do it, but there's no on-screen HUD during the game telling you how either of these things are progressing. It's pretty bare bones and all, but it's a fun way to kill 5 minutes. It really has that sort of browser game energy I was alluding to a little earlier, and given its release origins, you can kinda see why it's like this. According to the title screen, the game was originally released at The Party in December 1993, a demo scene party hosted at Herning Mess Center in Denmark. It's likely that the game was intended to entertain party guests in between demos and binge drinking sessions, so, it couldn't really be too substantial. Though it is worth noting that I could not find any evidence of this production at this party on DemoZoo or Pue. There's a demo with the same name, but no game, and the group that the game is credited to allegedly split up 3 years earlier in 1990. The game itself doesn't even show up on any of these demo scene archive sites. How mysterious. Not everything you found on a cover disc was taken from the public domain, though. Obviously, there were demos for larger commercial releases, but sometimes established developers would produce mostly original work, and you'd better believe a lot of silly little Christmas games came out of this. Every so often, you'd even get one from one of the real big dick software houses. Ever since I found Psycho Santa, released for free on the One Amiga's January '93 cover disc, it has been the first thing I think of whenever someone brings up Bullfrog Productions. Basically, you play as Santa, flying about this big empty map with a couple of houses in it, trying to throw your presents down the kids' chimneys as Death himself flies overhead. It's fun enough, neat little time waster for sure, but some Burke on Lemon Amiga really tried saying that this was better than Santa and Rudolph Do Christmas, and nah mate, give your head a wobble. I actually found it really hard to get to grips with the controls. The jerking momentum and forward slide you do whenever you toss something really threw me off, and the throwing arc was hard to get used to as well. The bonus stages where you try to pogo up a tree collecting presents as you go was a lot more fun to me, but even then, I really feel like this game would have benefited from some nice background music, or at least a little more ambient sound. It just feels so empty as it is, like it's missing something. The game had a shareware license, so you could send Bullfrog a $5 for an enhanced version of the game, but I haven't been able to locate a registered copy yet. I wonder if that version had some tunes. Less prestigious, but significantly more enjoyable in my opinion, is Galactic, Xmas Edition. It was a Christmasified version of a game that the One Amiga featured on an earlier cover disc, issue 46 in July 1992 to be exact. According to the magazine, the original demo sparked a good deal of excitement amongst readers, and for good reason. Sadly, the full game never came to be in its original form, but roughly a year and a half later, in January of 1994, a remixed, seasonal, and most importantly, complete version of the game would once again grace the mag's cover disc. Santa and Rudolph has my heart forever, but Galactic is probably my favorite game in the video. The whole thing just has this effervescent energy to it that I really adore. The graphics bring to mind the neon lights of the arcade with bold, bright colors dashing around, flashing against the blackness behind. And the music, by Jussi Paitila, has a childlike wonder to it. It's the sound of play, of sweet nostalgia, and the pitch-perfect announcer straight out of a Sega arcade is just the cherry on top. Everything about this game's presentation captures the joy of play and brings to mind good times spent wasting change in the arcade or exploring garish old GeoCities sites in the late 90s. The play is nothing to sniff at either, with surprisingly nuanced mechanics and extremely tight controls. You have two health bars represented by two different coloured bars in the top left of the screen. Colliding with a blue Santa will change your colour, aligning you with a different energy bar, and allowing you to strategically stave off death when the onslaught gets too much to dodge. Collecting the playing cards that defeated enemies drop will restore some of your energy, encouraging you to take an aggressive approach to recover your reserve suit's resources. It really cleverly pushes you to play the game in the most interesting way, taking risks and really going for it, though you probably won't work all of this out intuitively. The magazine serves as the game's manual, and most players will probably need to read it to figure out how the game works. There probably wasn't enough space on the disc for a tutorial, I guess. It just, more than any other game here, really captures the joy of the season for me. It wouldn't even need to be a Christmas game to take me back to the good old days. I haven't had a new-to-me retro game transport me back in time like this since I got hardcore into Quack. Just a wonderful little arcade blaster that I really can't recommend enough. You know, provided you can figure out how Amiga emulation fucking works.